Good morning. This is Dr. Matthew Dunn, host of The Future of Email. My guest today, Nicolas Toper of InboxBooster, and we just had 5 minutes to chat before this, so this is partially get acquainted and partially learn about your company. Nicolas, welcome.
Thank you.
Tell everybody about InboxBooster first, and then I'll ask you a bunch of questions on completely other topics.
So InboxBooster is a tool to tell you why you're in spam and what you need to do to get out of the spam box. So we're going to do test placement, so inbox placements. We're going to tell you, hey, this is you're in spam, and then we're going to tell you why. So we're going to analyze your email and we'll tell you have a reputation problem, your DNS is misconfigured, or some part of your content those parts are triggering spam filters. This is also free. Most of those tools is free. We have a pay as you want model. And for customers who need a little bit more hands-on approach, then we charge. That's basically our model. You can get it, you can test it for free. And usually it's for I'd say 80% of the users, it's enough.
Wow.
We have a free inbox
Interesting.
place.
Interesting place to jump in.
Thank you.
Email marketers and email inbox providers and the people who at the end of that pipe who are looking at their inbox. It's a funny global balancing act, isn't it?
Yes, it is, and that's actually interesting, and that's why I wanted to work on that business. Is people kind of have the marketers and email and ESPs like Gmail. They kind of have this tug of war on trying to outdo and to one up one another to figure out how we can kind of bypass the spam filter or how they can prevent it. But the thing is, it doesn't have to be like that. You can just do what they want, and actually you'll be in inbox and you will have not a lot of problem and you'll enjoy the good deliverability. But you need to understand what they want, and that's kind of the thing. And what they want, there are a couple of different requirements, and they're not very obscure, but they could be a little bit counterintuitive. Let me put it like that. And that's what we're explaining. We're telling you, hey, you have a problem. Here is why. Kind of go back to that all the time because you really have three different types of deliverability problems. The first one is it's a DNS problem or misconfiguration. The second one is it has nothing to do with you, but it's because somebody else did something wrong, and that's why. So, for instance, we had a customer. They were in promotion on Gmail, and that's because they had re-imported a part of the template from the basic template of Mailchimp, and that part was really flagged as a promotion by Gmail. So it has nothing to do with them.
Yeah.
But they have. And the third case, it has everything to do with them. And that is kind of the important case. Those cases are handled automatically by InboxBooster. And the second case is the last case where it has to do with you is you need to change your email practice in a good way or in a better way. And you need to kind of find a balance where you can still get to your business goals while you can get to the business goal of the spam filter, because the spam filter business goal is really to maximize page view. So their goal is to remove unwanted email into reasons, security problems, which I'm not talking about, like phishing email and stuff, and email that you as a person don't want to receive. So but the thing is, if you don't want to receive an email, there's no way you're going to buy it. To buy from it, you're going to click on it because you don't want to receive it. So you shouldn't send it.
The conundrum, right? I don't know you exist. I can't buy from you. If you tell me you exist and I want to buy from you, great. If you tell me you exist and I don't care, or I didn't want to hear that you exist, right? Bad, drag you to spam, and the whole cycle starts over again. So it seems like know thyself, know thy market is somewhere near the top of the list of things to do well. Yes?
It depends when you're a startup. Yes, but at the same time, knowing that you, for instance, we're working with some startups, and they don't know who they're selling to. This is really so. What I tell them all the time is send to 10 people or 10 to 50 people. You see if your email is in spam, and you've sent it through InboxBooster to check that everything is fine. This really means they don't like it. So if they don't like it, you're never going to sell to that segment. So it's change.
Okay. So in that scenario, you're helping them really follow pretty solid testing practices, solid, experimentation, if you will.
Yes, and that's kind of the idea where spam filters or this kind there is there. I mean, spam filters and marketers are not at odds with each other because if email is in inbox, it means people will buy from you or they'll be interested. So if you're able to identify that precisely,
Yeah.
then you're good because
Yeah.
then you don't it doesn't cost you anything to send to people who are not interested. That's why they introduced spam filter to kind of add check and balances.
Yeah.
But it's actually in your interest. I mean, it's not such a big problem because if you know that a specific segment is not interested, just don't email them. But then you
Right.
need to have you need to be careful into what you're sending. You need to have your segment. You need to do a little bit of statistics on top of that.
Mhm.
But it's totally possible. And the first step is to know why you're in spam, which is what we're telling you.
Yeah.
Because
Yeah. Yeah.
in a lot of cases it has nothing to do with you. So the problem is the ecosystem is a little bit blocked because you cannot have this feedback loop of
Yeah.
ISP telling you, hey, you're in spam because your email is wrong, because they're not going to give you enough granularity, which is what we're providing you with.
Okay. Okay. Gotcha. So you're helping to remove some of that awful black box sensation about deliverability issues. Like, oh, wait a minute, no one's seeing this. Why? Well, good luck. Good luck finding that out. Yeah, that's a complicated problem. Next.
Yeah, that's exactly what we're doing, and then you'll know what to work on and where the problem's coming from, and that will tell you how to fix it.
Wow. So I have a background question that occurred to me as I was reading your LinkedIn profile and some of the interesting things you've done. You just spent some time in Y Combinator, correct?
A few years ago, yeah.
Good experience.
Yeah, it was very interesting for me because I come from a totally different background. Like when I created my first startup, it was literally to pay my rent because so I'm coming from France, and in France, when you don't have like a good degree and you're not very known and all that, it's hard to find a job because it's kind of permanent employment. So at my time, people were creating companies because they couldn't get a job, not because they could get a job and they wanted to get rich. So my first startup, which was in email, was really because I needed to pay my rent,
Yeah,
and
it's a
and
good
so
motive.
it's the best one. And I had actually no money, and we built and yes, I built an ESP, which was kind of the new. Now it's very common, but at that time it was an FTTP relay, like SoundGrid and all those people. And because we were first on the market, we were able to grow pretty big without capital at all because we
Wow. Wow. Yeah, good for you.
had like
In at least partially France being a central market for you, right?
no, access was the US. So the biggest
Was it
market was
US?
in the US.
Interesting.
Yes, the biggest market was the US, and because so we were it was pretty good, but I literally had to borrow to someone $1,000 to register the company because I really had no money, so it was really
Right.
that bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And then the business grew really fast, and we had to stop accepting users for 2 years because we had to rebuild the because in France it was very hard to raise funding. Or no,
Yeah.
actually, it's not great. It was possible to raise funding. It was very hard to raise funding at good terms.
Yeah.
So we're making like I don't know, like 10 or 15K per month, and we had someone offering me 50K for 15% of the company,
I don't think
and
so.
he was like, yeah, and that was the best deal I could find. That actually made sense. So at that time, it was like that. So like, oh, okay, I'll just stay small, but that's it. So we
Right.
grew to a little bit over $1 million of revenue, and then I sold the business after for a couple of years, well, after
Nice.
five to ten
Nice.
years.
Congrats. For starting with I got to pay the rent. That's a wonderful story,
Thank you.
right? Doesn't always happen, does it?
I think it's easier than it looks.
Yeah.
Yes, because when you have to pay the rent and you don't have, you kind of have to, so the motivation is actually maximum.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
you don't have a lot of money, but that means that every mistakes you're going to do are not going to be very expensive. Also, everything is cheap. Like after 1 or 2 months, we're making like 3K per month of revenue.
Yeah.
I was like, oh yeah, I'm really big. I mean, I'm making more than I could get as an employee, which was what I could get as an employee.
Yeah.
So I'm like, oh, this is cool. This is awesome. But if you're out of Google and you have like a really big paycheck, things are more complicated
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
you have more options. So this is kind of the bane of having too many options when you're kind of when you have your back under against the wall. It's a little bit. I'm not sure it's easier, but I know there is not a lot of decision to be made if you know what you have to do.
Is very focusing.
Yes.
I've run companies that are VC funded. I've run companies that are bootstrapped. I like bootstrap because there's a there's a clarity about what you're doing, right? And it's very usually it's very personal, right? got to make this work. Why? Rent, tuition, whatever, right? Got to make this work, not because I'm going to get yelled at by the guy who loaned me a bunch of money, because you can live with getting yelled at. It's not pleasant, but so what? Bootstrap, you got to make it work. So you drop into Y Combinator, and here's my Y Combinator question. Y Combinator, for better or worse, my mental picture is cutting edge, really interesting startups. You don't usually put email in a sentence with those other two. Were they like, what do you mean you're going to focus on email at Y Combinator? Or were they like, hey.
So actually, we went in with a compiler startup, but so they had companies doing email. Actually, it's not really a problem per se.
Excellent.
No, like email is a big deal. It's very much underappreciated, but
Yes.
email is a big deal. I mean, there is a lot of podcasts like yours about that. There are like lots of publications about that. It's just very old, but so is internet, so is the web. It's just it's very under, and also it's in kind of this odd place where it's an oligopoly of a couple of providers like Gmail, Outlook, somebody else. So it's the only open network. I mean, if you've heard everything about Web3 like from last year, email is already that. So
yes.
It's underappreciated.
Yes.
It's already a distributed network. It's permissionless and all that. So you already have a lot of those factors.
Yes.
So it's just very underappreciated, and it's kind of the only open network so far, as far as I can tell, where you can email someone. Like if I want to email the president of the USA, I can.
Yeah.
I mean, it's going to answer me. But if I have something to tell him, somebody on his staff is going to read it.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is kind of, and it's owned by no one in the sense that if I want to open an email server, I can do it. I don't have to ask permission to or have a credit card. This is kind of the only time you've been in that space. And those layers of communication, of interpersonal communications, has always been critical for the world. Like before it was postal service, they always has been operated by governments because they were important people. There has been a law about government not being allowed to open letters and all that. So you're talking about actual very important elements of democracies of the world. And email is the only one who kind of fit that bill, being owned by no one and with this open network. So I think that people don't realize how important it is. And because of that, so you have Slack, you have alternatives. But if you want to receive an invoice, for instance, like an official notification, 20 years ago, you would have received it in your physical mailbox. Now you're going to receive an email about it.
Yeah.
So it is important. And it's a lot more important that people realize it because it's known by nobody. There is nobody who has a vested interest in explaining that you need to do it can do better. So the fact that it's cutting edge or not is irrelevant in the sense that if it's not cutting edge, it's because nobody has invested in it. It's not because there is nothing to do with it. If that makes sense.
Right. Well, kudos to you. I agree with everything you just said about the not obvious importance of that particular channel, email, because of all the factors you just listed off. There's also no commercial gatekeeper, not really. There's no commercial gatekeeper saying, "Oh, you can use email, but we've decided to raise the price."
Yep,
that's a big deal.
Yes, and I really agree, and that is why we're trying to kind of fix the situation. And the goal of this company is to kind of make it more known, but also add something. Let me give you another example. Everybody's talking about AI, about how you're going to kind of learn how to manage our AI overlord or future AI overlord. But that's literally and precisely what is a spam filter, and that's our job, is to basically understand what this AI is doing, so human people can do something about it.
Yeah.
So this is already what we're doing. So when you're saying it's not cutting edge, it's just that it's not a TechCrunch type of innovation.
Yeah.
People don't care, but they buy, first of all, which is in a way the metric that matters, and it's important, which is the second metric that matters. Now, we probably need to, as an ecosystem, as an industry, we absolutely need to do a better job of explaining how important it is.
Yeah. Well, we need to do a better job of explaining how important it is. And we also need to do a much better job of reminding people how incredibly huge channel it is. I mean, I've seen various studies about the volume of web page views and the volume of this and the volume of that, and they usually leave email off the chart because it's so damn big, almost everything else would disappear. Like we shove 320 billion emails a day around the planet. It's like, don't bother me telling me about your social network growing. It's peanuts by comparison. And it's so easy to forget because it's been around a long time and because everyone's got an inbox and they're used to doing it, et cetera. Like we're a little snowblind, right? Like, oh, yeah, it's just email. Hang on a second. That is one huge, complicated channel you're talking about there.
What's true though is in India they have less email, and in
Mhm.
China they don't use email. But in the Occidental part of the world and
Yeah.
in Africa, a lot of people are using email and they're okay with it, and there is no and that's normal. So this
Yeah.
is kind of there is nothing. The problem is the tools are really antiquated. Like for instance, we really the tools are antiquated and they're also you need to kind of rebuild it. That's
Yes.
more the thing. But if you do, the people will come, and there is no question. And again, I mentioned this example of a couple of companies growing to several hundreds of millions of revenue by using cold outreach email. They're just not going to tell you about it because they don't want people to copy them. But this is really how they do it. So it's a big deal. I mean, Groupon now it's a bit old, but that's how they used to grow big. Or even if you think about Facebook, they used to grow big with invitation.
Yeah. Yeah.
So this was a big deal for them at that time. It was a very important problem. So how do you? So it is still it's something to grow off, and it's important. And on top of being important from a business point of view, it's important for the world because you don't want your kind of communication layer to be owned by a gigantic corporation who
Yeah.
can decide to shut you down at any time. So this is kind of the type of problem we want to fix.
Yeah. Or in by contrast, right? China specifically as a market, email is hardly used at all. And WeChat, I believe, is the predominant channel, and the owner there is the government, and they get to say everything that goes on.
Yes, but that's the design of their system.
Yeah.
In the democracies part of the world, there is actually there is another design, which is if you want to talk to someone, you need to be able to do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
If you're not able to, then you need to kind of have a reason to do it. And this is kind of important because, like for instance, I've seen the Republican National Congress, I think that's the name. They wanted to sue Google because they were getting landing in spam at Google, and they had on Gmail, and they had no reason, they don't understand what to do. So the thing was dismissed and all that. But this is still the type of problem that happens. Or in France, I remember during the presidential election, everybody was trying to email everybody else, and the opt-in law in this case don't apply because if you're a French citizen, you need to be able to receive the electoral propaganda from every party. So you can choose to not read them, but you need to be able to access them.
Yeah.
So how do you reconcile that with the fact of with spam filters and the fact that it's a democracy? Because my point is, you need to receive those emails. Before, you used to receive them in physical mailbox. We still do in France, but you could receive exactly the same by email. It would be
Yeah.
exactly the
Yeah.
same thing.
Yeah. Which is
But
yeah, better, faster, cheaper. So I want to pick on one particular piece of the equation, and I'll preface it by saying I'm a big user of and fan of many things that Google has done, but the fact that 66% of inboxes are now Gmail inboxes makes me a bit nervous because it's a big number. It's the big company and control kind of number that email has stayed free of for a long time, and the numbers going up, by the way, quite nicely, quite dramatically. And I'm like, do I want one company to end up in such a control position over this channel? I really don't. I really, really don't. And I would guess that a lot of what InboxBooster does is essentially say what the hell's going on in the Gmail inbox, right?
that's correct. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So are you bothered by that? Is there anything we can do
Yes.
about it?
Yes, that's our next step. But first of all, it's not as dramatic as it sounds because a lot of those boxes are not active because you actually need one to activate an Android system. And the second reason is we're actually planning to do so. So we've actually released an open source MTA. So like a computer to sound grid and all that, that's open source. You can install and run on your system. We have customers running on it. And
Mm-hmm.
two, we're actually planning to launch an open source system for where you can host your email in the normal way, like a non-crazy way where you actually have to run a bunch of command lines on Unix to make it work. So this is kind of our roadmap here. And we're starting
Okay.
with Gmail because we
Yeah.
want also to understand well, because it's a market I know, but
Yeah.
this is kind of the next step of what we want to do. The way I look at it is you should own your domain, you should own your email address, and
Yes.
then you can switch providers if you want to.
Yeah.
And if you don't want anyone to touch your email to have access to it, then it should be possible. It used to be
Right.
possible.
Right.
Now it's not. So, and the problem, and this is kind of a new situation also because 10 years ago, like email was like a kind of postcards or just it was like what you're having on a messenger chat or WhatsApp. Now you actually have a very, very important information. For instance, in my with my personal mailbox, I say like all of my life, my administrative life and all of things that matters are there. Not everything, but if I lose my mailbox, I'm
Yeah.
in big trouble.
Yes. Yes. Yeah.
So the
Okay.
fact that it's free from Google is good,
Yeah.
but it's also, but at the same time,
The risk.
because it's free, they can decide to shut me down at any time
Yeah.
for
Yeah.
whatever reason they want.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
So and I've heard stories. So I use the Pixel, for instance, at the smartphone, and I've heard that they had problems when you were sending back the smartphone Google, and some people wanted the chargeback, didn't get what they wanted, and they had no way to talk to them.
Yeah.
And when you issue the chargeback, then Google shut you down from their service. So this is kind of scary for this, because in my case, I would be, yeah, my life would be very, very complicated for
Yes.
probably 6 months to a year,
Yeah.
even probably maybe even more if I've lost everything.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah,
So,
you're absolutely right. It's grown invisibly enough, but rapidly enough in the past, what, decade or so, that footprint of Gmail specifically, that conscious thought about the risk, the locus of control, and the lack of really slam dunk alternatives, right? Super technical user, I can migrate stuff. We go, oh, yeah, okay, do all this stuff. It's now in Proton Mail. It's now somewhere else. Great, we can do that. Man on the street, my wife, my mom, no freaking way,
yeah.
right? And their life is sitting in a Gmail inbox and here's a question: who owns that?
I think it's you, but they have, I don't think they read your email. They're saying they don't, but then it's kind of complicated as well to fix.
But it's kind of complicated, right? And is it possible to get that thing you own shut off? Yes. So do you really own it?
Yeah, I agree. No, but that's the kind of things that will work. But that's why we, as first step, we're explaining why there's spam filter, how the
Yeah.
spam filter works. You can actually, as a marketer, do it because that's easier because marketers have an ROI to that decision and to that problem. So because of it, they know how much money they can spend, and because we're even though with the Y Combinator, we're not like it's not like we had raised $30 million and we could do that. So we start with that. And then that's the second step is actually to build an efficient competing tool where you own your data and you can do what you want with it. But you need to build an email client, which is more expensive.
Not trivial. Yeah, I had a guest a couple months ago, Jacob Wenger from Shortwave, which is an AI-driven email client, specifically sits on top of Gmail. And he said a couple things that still stick in my mind. He said email is a great candidate for applying AI technologies and techniques because it's probably the most personal collection of data you've got. Like you want one collection of data that's your inbox is as close to being it as any single source is. But then he said, building an email client is hard. It's hard because the technologies and protocols are old. The things we throw on top of email are just like ungodly. I've got a correspondence going with some copyright lawyers for another business, and they do everything in email threads. Some of these email threads are months long, and reading them in reverse is like a freaking nightmare. But like that's standard operating procedure for lawyers. The things we put email to doing are a bit shocking. So Jacob's point, building an email client, actually a surprisingly tough task. That's why there are not that many of them out there. Really?
No, there are not not a couple of the good ones or very few, and that's it's underappreciated. But from my point of view, it's valued very well by the market when you actually can demonstrate scale and all that. And it's not definitely not a bad business, and it's not going to be on the front page of TechCrunch, to be clear. And that's I think more an industry problem on our side. To do collectively better job than a requirement. But if you look at the figures like the money flowing, the way it's working and the importance of it, it's actually pretty significant. And yes, it's hard because if it were easy, then it would have been done already.
Yeah, yeah. And then the fact that there's no one in charge, which you alluded to really early on, right? No government, no big company or whatever. It's a bit of a free for all. And anybody that enters the email market, building an ESP, which you've done, building an email client, which Jacob's team has done, it's like you got to figure out how to play in the free for all and deal with what someone else in that world might throw at you. Oh, we do this protocol slightly differently at Google, and at Yahoo we do it that way. You got to accommodate it because your customer doesn't want to have to care about it. Okay, that's going to be hard. Yeah, interesting
Yes,
space.
yes, but that's also that's like I remember I talked at some point I talked to its founder, and he told me that so the Twilio founder, he built at that time, he built a fake ESP and Twilio to figure, and he looked at it, he threw some Google money and Google ads to see which business would outperform the other, and it was the IVR, so the phone system with
Yeah,
SMS and all that, that's outperform email. I look at it like, yeah, that's normal because email is something you do when you, I mean, that's obvious. Email is something you do when you have no money because
yeah,
because you can that need to ask permission about it.
yeah,
And this is for $10,000 at it. So if you have $10,000, yeah, you need to build to buy some special cards to handle specific phone lines and all that because that's a barrier to entry. So the fact that it has no barrier to entry creates it's both a harder ecosystem to operate as this free for all that you mentioned because people copy each other all the time. They're
yeah,
trying to
yeah,
outdo one another.
yeah,
But that's also basically called free market, and that's has been demonstrated to create value for consumers.
yeah,
So
yeah,
uh, so the fact that people say, "Oh yeah, we would prefer to be in a nice place where there is only one big company is taking care of us," it's not really how economy works. If that makes sense. I mean, we've done that path, and it's not really good.
yeah,
So, and
yeah,
this is what you're seeing also a little bit with Gmail and having evolved a lot. It's super slow as an app, so there has been competition popping up. Like you mentioned, shortwave. There's also
yeah,
Superhuman, who's very
yep,
successful.
yep,
Um, there are a couple of others up and coming companies, and and that's good, and that's where
yeah,
we want to be. We
yeah,
want people to put money and try to improve the ecosystem,
yeah, yeah.
and that's actually a good thing. And that's a good thing. Now, if I want to improve WhatsApp, I don't think I can.
Right,
And if I'm
right.
actually improving WhatsApp significantly,
Yeah,
then I'm sure of losing my money because Meta will copy me and outdo me, and there's nothing I can do about it.
yeah, yeah,
Or
yeah,
Twitter, like that's or Reddit, that's exactly what they did. Just shut down or they put the API in a very expensive way. So it's not a common. This is owned by someone very
yeah.
specific. They
Yes.
want to make money because that's what businesses do, and there is nothing wrong with that.
Yeah,
So, but then you cannot rely on that. Email, there is this kind of beauty in it because it's owned, it's permissionless, it's owned by no one.
yeah,
So spam filter, for instance, in our business, Gmail, Outlook are doing their job, which is preventing unwanted email from being delivered. Other people are trying to do their job, which is kind of try to circumvent the spam filters with warm up technologies and all that. And we're
mhm,
doing what we feel is the right thing, which is explaining why the spam filter made that decision and what you can do to kind of fix it. And which means that you have one side of the problem of the ecosystem that took their defended their interest or their users' interest, there is a way to kind of circumvent the spam filter, which has been plugged a couple of months ago, which is the warm up. And there is our way, which is really to try to rebalance everything. This and for most users, it's really good enough. For some users, it's not going to be good enough, and they'll try to look for something. So you have this system where you have this ecosystem where you can pick whomever you want,
mhm,
and you can still build good businesses like that. So it's kind of I think and again, you don't need to ask permission because we didn't ask
yeah,
Google or Outlook
yeah,
for their permission.
yeah,
Now we make sure that what we're doing is not going against their own interest. Because, for instance, we're trying to circumvent the spam filters. It's not the sort of battle you can win. It's not sort of something you want to do. At
sure.
least this is not something I'm comfortable doing. But some other people are, and they're doing a good job of it. And there's nothing wrong. I mean, my point is, it's you can do it, and you can just look at what they're doing, and because you're not acting against them, they're not going to shut you down because they just don't care. Because it's not the part of the business.
Right.
If I kind of try to get on the territory of WhatsApp or Gram or whatever,
Yeah,
at some point they'll try to do it like I remember I know a business, they're doing a video type of Instagram, so we're kind of doing an editor for that. TikTok is doing something similar because it's their complement, so they want, but they made it free because they don't really care because they're like, oh yeah, if we actually give away this video edition tool and we put like 100 people on it, then we'll grow our business by 10%. And because our businesses were billion, that's a huge amount of money, so it's worth doing.
Yeah, it's a big number. Yeah, you've got to be careful where you put your development investment, and it's not just a software issue, that's a control issue. Like we went down the rabbit hole once of integrating with a bunch of Facebook's APIs and just keeping up with them, trying to stay ahead of the law in society was costing us a fortune. Like, oh man, we have to tee this up again and apply for permission for that call. And like, we scrapped it because trying to dance to their tune just wasn't worth it after a while. And I'm guessing that's how a lot of Twitter add-ons feel right now. Like, throwing up their hands and going, "Cripe, we've got years in this, but we really don't have any control, do we?" And email, you don't have that problem.
On top of not having control, there is a over.
Sorry, Nicholas, Zoom just went stutter. Could you repeat the last sentence?
There is also kind of a game theory problem. Like if you're Twitter and you have an app that's more successful than there is an inherent tension here. And if you don't have enough control points on the ecosystem, you are not going to be able to negotiate successfully because the position, you will not be negotiating from a position of force. So it's going to be hard. And that used to be what Microsoft during Windows did. They were like, oh yeah, that's good what you're doing, we'll just do the same. So with email, you don't have that problem because again, they don't own the protocol. So, and they're very hard to evolve. And an example of that happened. So I told you we launched an MTA. The reason we did that is because, and before I built an ESP. So almost 20 years ago, I built an ESP. The reason is because at that time, reputation was stuck on IP, and most customers didn't know how to create a good IP reputation. Now, with the KIM and with AI, reputation has moved to the domain, which means that the IP doesn't matter, which means that what we did, we had the customers, they were on SoundGrid. We moved them to their own cluster that they set up, their Kubernetes cluster of their system. And the day after, they had migrated everything or almost, because they were able to migrate the reputation of the domain. Because the domain, there is no, it's just the same domain, so they don't care. For ISP, it was the same domain from their point of view, so they don't care where it was sent. So it worked out of the box. There was no problem.
Wow, nice.
So why would you pay? So you're talking about people paying 50 to 100K to SoundGrid, and they move to a cost of like a couple of machines. So it went basically down to zero. So that's because of that protocol. And now also it's starting to be this, they're going to look directly at the individual email instead of looking at the template level on top of the domain reputation. So that kind of deprioritize completely the IP. For most on Gmail and a little bit Outlook, it's still important, but less. So why would you want to so why would you pay for those providers in that case? And that's what we're saying. And so that's kind of, and that has evolved, but that has been evolving for like 10 years. So it's very slow. That's why people, but now it's really working. And nobody really had people had figured it out, but they don't understand because they don't care enough. But if you can show, hey, look, you don't need to use SoundGrid or SparkBars or whichever, you can just use your own server and you'll get 90% of the value for 1% of the cost. Then
wow, I'm gonna have to look at this. That's quite interesting. Are you gonna fit that in under the InboxBooster brand, or is that a separate venture?
No, it's InboxBooster. It's an InboxBooster brand. It's just that so basically we give away the MTA. And we sell if you want deliverability services on top of it, like making something that SoundGrid doesn't do unless you pay them a lot more money, which is really telling you which emails are in spam and promotion and why and how you and what's kind of the root cause. Because so this is just what we're doing, and because it's within our NTA, it's automatically integrated. So you know, so it's much easier for us. And we built it simply because we were tired of integrating with all those kind of SoundGrid, Montreal, and all of them. So we're like, you know what? Let's just do it. It will be easier.
Wow. No, that's a bold leap. You built one before, so maybe that's a bit of a shortcut, but that's still a lot of work.
Well, actually, not that much. That's kind of the thing. Is it's not that much work because it's really something my co-founder did over the course of a couple of months. So it's really not that much. It's
Wow.
really not hard, not that hard. So you're right. I had the architecture,
Yeah.
but that's kind of the thing is you that. But yeah, so I had the architecture, but it wasn't very much work because of a lot of problems disappeared in this case, and like a lot of old problems are not there anymore. And it's basically assembling a couple of libraries together and kind of knowing what are the right thresholds. So it's not as hard as it looks.
Hmm.
And that's interesting also email because basically, if you think from an economical point of view, what SoundGrid, Mandrill, and so on are doing is they're really doing run seeking. Like they have built a system 10 years ago,
Yeah.
they're profiting from it, and they're
Yeah.
not really investing a lot of money into it because there hasn't been and you can just look at the new features here,
Yeah.
which are basically they're just adding consulting. You can pay a lot of money to them to do their job. So because it's permissionless, then we can do it. Then we don't, and that kind of remove the run seeking approach. In the case of WhatsApp, they probably introduced new feature, but nothing you can notice. So now, if I want an open source WhatsApp, I can have Signal,
Yeah.
which has been created by the founding team of WhatsApp. So
Yeah.
they're aware of that problem.
Yeah.
But this is kind of the same. If you have this idea that you want a permissionless system to kind of communicate with other people,
Hmm.
whether
Yeah.
as a business or as a person.
Yeah.
Trusting companies is kind of yeah. It's also like right now, for instance, a lot of people are doing sales for LinkedIn or Google Ads. It's good,
Mhm.
but they can decide to increase price by 10. They can decide that you compete with
Yes.
them.
Yes. Yes.
You always have that problem.
Yeah. 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 It's it's a little interesting to me, and it's maybe a sign of the maturation of the role of internet and digital in the world, is that frequently a technical discussion sounds like a civics discussion, right? We're not just talking about the technical issues here. We're talking about the societal issues.
Well, the thing is, Stack has, but the way I explain it is before you used to have paper. Now we move papers in bits, so you have electronic communication.
Yeah.
And paper are actually important for civic issues, for democracies, and how people coordinate. And
Yeah.
now they have moved to these new systems.
Yeah.
And nobody really knows how to do that. And if you think when we introduced the printing press, it's kind
Yeah.
of created a wave of revolution and a lot
Sure.
of unrest in Europe.
Yeah.
The key element here is we moved everything from paper to something else.
Yeah. Yeah.
Email is one of the pillar,
One of them. Yeah. Yeah.
but we don't understand really what that means yet. But if you look at what we did with postal services, they used to be private, then they
Yes.
became owned by the government because they decided that it was important that everybody had access to that, and a lot of
And then a lot
which
of
raised
governments have privatized them, in the last 20 years, which is interesting. Yeah.
yes, that's because also there is good service now everywhere, and now it has migrated to email. A lot of those
Yeah. Yeah.
communications,
A lot of it. Yeah. Yeah.
but still, Gunther.
No, it's just the US is like I lived in Australia. Their post is private. I think the UK's post has gone private. Canada post was privatized. The US is like half pregnant. The US Postal Service is, it's a quasi monopoly. Is it a government agency or not? We're not sure. Does it work well? Not anymore. So
Yes,
it's
but they were able to, but FedEx was able to, or an UPS and a lot of
yes,
other companies were able
yeah,
to
jumping and
get in
competing.
business, and
Yeah,
nobody told them you don't have the right to do it, and they were able to build a profitable business with Parcel. France is public, and they're
yeah,
getting privatized.
yeah.
But in France, what happens is the post nobody's sending mail like I think the number of actual physical mail has been decreased by 5 or 10.
Whew.
So
No surprise, right? No surprise.
it's
Like, yeah,
but
yeah,
it's been answered by email.
yeah, yeah.
So, but this email, but my point is more historically when they decided to build, when they built postal services, this was a key infrastructure element of a country. Like
Right.
it was important.
Yeah,
This is
yeah,
why there was a USPS in the US, which was important.
yeah,
In Australia, at some point, it was public. In the UK, it was public also. And then it became less important.
yeah,
But there has been a lot of debate going on, like, what does the government has the right to open your private correspondences, like your mails? Do they have to? Can you? What happens if you send illegal content? What is? I mean, there has been a lot of discussions around this concept. It's been very, very important during the 18th century. And there has been a lot of debates going on both in France, but in the US, and so it's been important. And we have the same debate, and this type of conversation happens still through email, and they're never going to happen on WhatsApp or on Signal. So,
Yes.
and those
Yes.
debates didn't happen. Like Google, when they get your email, they have the right to open it, and they have the right to read it, and they have automated tools doing it. Is this okay or not? I don't know, but what I know is we don't have as a society a conversation about that,
Yes.
and that is basically the what we're raising, and that's why it goes to civic issues, because those issues are not solved and they're not thought, they haven't been talked about, and they haven't been debated.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the fact that I'm selling a deliverability tool and we're talking about it is kind of the symptom of the problem, because
Yes.
we shouldn't have to.
Yes. Yes. Well, Nicolas, we got to wrap up. So, because you got a startup to run, and I think I have another Zoom call in a minute here. But where someone who goes, wait a minute, I can find out why I'm going to spam. They're all ears. Where do they go? InboxBooster.com.
InboxBooster.com, exactly,
Well,
and they can test it for free, and they've got free inbox placement, and they can see why, and they can analyze their costs.
terrific. Well, thank you so much for the time. What a great conversation.
Thank you for having me. It's been super interesting.
I'll get in touch when we take the episode live, and we'll see what we can do to help get word out. Thanks again. This is
Thank you.
Nicolas from Inbox Booster.
Yeah, thank you.